Witches are a long-standing cultural icon, having been described in myths, legends, and even historical records for centuries. 2 centuries ago, many women had found themselves on the wrong end of an accusation of witchcraft and conspiring with the devil, and it would spell their doom. It's estimated that around 40,000 people were executed for the crime of witchcraft in Western Europe during the witch craze that swept the continent between the 15th and 17th centuries. Witch hunts even made their way to America, with colonies in New England, New Haven, and Connecticut playing host to witch hysteria, not to mention the infamous witch trials in Salem, Massachusetts. The most common execution methods for convicted witches were burning at the stake, drowning, and hanging. Here are 7 of the most famous so-called witches in history. Number 7. Mother Shipton. The tale of Ursula Southall was passed down orally for generations before it was finally put to paper. The story has only become even more unbelievable as time has passed. Some legends suggest that Southall was born in 1488, the daughter of an unwed teenage mother. It is said she was born in a cave in Knaresborough, North Yorkshire, in England. The site of the mineral spring that formed the cave would itself become a tourist attraction. Some accounts have painted Southall as a witch, the daughter of a whore who slept with the devil himself. Either way, Southall would become known by the name Mother Shipton, a woman who was just as famous for her prophecies as she was for her unfortunate appearance. When the persecution of witches began to die down in 1736, Mother Shipton would be referred to as a prophetess rather than a witch. It is said that she gave her prophecies in verse, much like Nostradamus. However, it is unfortunate that Mother Shipton would never write her predictions down. Records of the prophecies began to appear in 1641, 8 decades after Shipton died. The prophecies that were proven true were the ones that were published after an incident. Anything posted before any incident, a prophecy that predicted a future event, did not come true. The most famous of her visions that didn't come true was a prediction that the world would end in 1881. It's entirely possible that Ursula Southall was a well-known medicine woman where she lived, but the idea of her being a prophetess or a witch is attributed to promotions of the cave and the mineral spring. Mother Shipton died in 1561 when she was 73 years old. Number 6. KATHARINA Haeno. KATHARINA Haeno, born in 1570, would become the first female postmaster in Germany. It was a position that she, along with her brother, had inherited from her father. Haeno was well respected in her home city of Cologne, but she would still get caught up in the witch trials that ran through the city between 1626 and 1631. She was accused of witchcraft in 1627. She was said to have made a group of nuns sick. Haeno was tortured for several months, but she adamantly refused to confess to being a witch. She was nevertheless found guilty and was sentenced to be executed by burning at the stake. However, the court proceedings in her case were suspect from the very beginning. The courts did not follow the legal procedure of the time. Her brother attempted to appeal, but unfortunately for Haeno, the execution still took place. The case was retried in 2012, and Haeno was posthumously exonerated around 400 years after her death. Number 5. ALSE Young. ALSE Young, also known as Alice Young, was born in Windsor, Connecticut in 1600. We don't know much about ALSE except that she was the first person ever to be hanged for witchcraft in the American colonies. She was executed in 1647, a mere 5 years after witchcraft was declared punishable by hanging. It was also the beginning of the witchcraft scare of Connecticut that saw many witch trials and executions between 1647 and 1662. Things changed when Governor John Winthrop declared that someone couldn't be convicted as a witch based on one accuser or witness. The number of accusations started to dwindle after this. This comes with a rather unfortunate implication. Young, as well as most of the other witches who were executed, were done so on the word of just one person. Young did have a daughter, born Alice Young Beeman. Alice was also accused of witchcraft some 30 years after her mother, but thankfully she was not executed. Number 4. MALIN MATSDOTTER. Over 200 people were executed in Sweden between 1668 and 1676 for the crime of witchcraft. This era of witch trials and executions came to an end following the execution of one MALIN MATSDOTTER, which is likely because of the horrific nature of how she died. Born in Sweden in 1613, Matsdotter was accused of being a witch by her own daughters. Her daughters claimed that Matsdotter had kidnapped her own grandchildren from them and taken them to a witch's Sabbath rite. Matsdotter denied all of the charges and refused to confess to the crimes. She was tortured but continued to deny the accusations before being handed a single sentence. Matsdotter was to be burned alive. Other people accused of witchcraft in Sweden were hanged or beheaded before they were burned. Matsdotter was burned alive on August the 5th, 1676, the same day as another convicted witch, Anne Sumundsdottir Hack. Hack approached her death with resigned humility, praying until the very end. She was decapitated before the fire was ignited, while Matsdotter stood firm and continued to reiterate her innocence as she burned alive. There were few others accused of witchcraft after this, but there were no more executions. There was only one other witch executed in Sweden, and this execution didn't happen until 1704. It became more likely for accusers to be arrested after the death of MALIN MATSDOTTER. Some accusers were even themselves executed for perjury. Number 3. TITUBA. Not much is known about TITUBA. We don't know her birth name or when she was born. We do know that she was a real person and, outside of some fictional characters, is the most famous witch in American history. Samuel Parris brought TITUBA to Boston with him, along with 2 other slaves from his sugar plantation in Barbados in 1680. Parris moved to Salem village and began a family there, and TITUBA went with them. After Parris's 9-year-old daughter Betty and her 11-year-old cousin Abigail Williams began to exhibit strange and unexplained behaviour, it was believed to be a sign of supernatural possession. TITUBA was one of the prime suspects. As a Caribbean slave, she proved to be a convenient scapegoat. The girls accused TITUBA and several other women from the city of Salem of oppressing them when the idea of witchcraft was mentioned. Samuel Parris took TITUBA and beat her until she confessed to all of the accusations. TITUBA was arrested on February the 29th, 1692, along with Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne. Their crime was witchcraft when the witch hunt frenzy of Salem was just beginning. This frenzy, which began in 1692, saw hundreds of people accused of witchcraft, 20 of whom were executed for the crime, including Sarah Good, and 5 who died in prison, including Sarah Osborne. TITUBA, however, was the only one of the 3 who actually confessed to witchcraft, and was also the only one not executed for it. She stayed in jail until the hysteria had died down, never going to trial. She would be stuck in jail for 13 months as Samuel Parris refused to pay the fees to have her released. Number 2. The Chesterville Witch. The grave of the Chesterville Witch sits in a small graveyard in the heart of Illinois Amish country. The story of the Chesterville Witch says that a local woman was accused of witchcraft in the early 1900s after she challenged the Amish faith. The town elders branded her a servant of the devil and banished her, but a body mysteriously turned up in a nearby field a few days later. Terrified that she would come back to life and seek revenge upon the townsfolk, some people buried her and planted an oak tree on her grave to mark its location. The legend of the Chesterville witch says that the soul of the woman resides in the oak tree. If the tree were to be destroyed or cut down, the ghost of the woman would be free to finally seek revenge on those who killed her. Number 1. Helen Duncan. Out of all the women on our list, this last woman appears to be genuine. The British laws against witches were outlined in the infamous Witchcraft Act of 1563. Many people were prosecuted under these laws, which were eventually replaced by the more enlightened Witchcraft Act of 1735. The new laws did away with the crime of witchcraft itself and put an end to the era of witch hunts and executions. It also criminalised pretending to be a witch and pretending to possess supernatural abilities. It was effectively a law against fraud rather than witchcraft. Helen Duncan was a Scottish medium who travelled through the country in the early 20th century. She held seances, told fortunes, and was able to conjure up ectoplasm. The authorities would generally ignore these activities unless they received a complaint. This changed during World War II. British authorities learned Duncan had supposedly revealed the sinking of 2 British ships during the seances, even though the news had been censored by the government at the time and she would have had no way of knowing this happened. Duncan was arrested in January 1944. The charge may have been treason or espionage, but this would be difficult to prove, especially without having to disclose government secrets. Rather, Duncan was tried as a witch under the 1735 law. She was jailed for 9 months and was not released until after the war ended. The Witchcraft Act of 1735 was eventually repealed a few years later in 1951.